While in office, Democrats passed landmark infrastructure legislation, but most voters don't realize or just don't care. Politico reports that Team Blue is having trouble getting voters to recognize the $1.2 trillion infrastructure law as a win for them. The bill promises to rebuild the nation's roads and bridges, expand broadband service, put more electric vehicles on the road, and provide millions of Americans with cleaner drinking water. But the country won't see the fruits of that labor for a few years.
What's more is that most voters don't even know the bill passed in Congress. So, Ameshia, can you help us break this down? Why is this such an issue for the Democrats?
Well, quite frankly, because this was the landmark piece of legislation from President Biden. This is the biggest. This is the most arduous. This is the one that was set to get our economy back on track. Before the infrastructure package, the infrastructure bill, the first bipartisan piece that came out of this administration, we were looking at a C-D rating for infrastructure as a nation. That is horrible for the richest nation on earth. We've seen the toll that unavailable or badly worked roads, rails, and bridges have taken, specifically with the influx of natural disasters. We know about the grid system that totally failed in Texas. We're watching the heat waves rise across the Southeast. These issues are creating so much trouble for people to just live their daily lives. And it's frustrating because, again, the president went through such a hard task of selling this to get those Republican votes, to get those Republican senators across the line. Hell, to even get two of the stalwarts of the Democratic Party, Manchin and Sinema, to actually support it as well. And it is a strategic piece that is the largest infrastructure package that we have seen in this country for generations. And as you all know, during the Trump administration, Infrastructure Week was literally every week of his administration and nothing ever happened. Here we get it across the aisle, and quite frankly, Americans seem to not care.
Democrats never talk about it. It's like they're embarrassed to have pushed through something that Republicans supported and voted for, right? That will trigger too many of their viewers on mainstream and progressive cable news that they did something that some Republicans also like. I mean, they never talk about it as their accomplishments. It doesn't fit with it's abortion, it's threats to existential threats to democracy, etc.
The issue is they didn't bring it up on the campaign trail.
Yeah,
they talked about it when they were trying to get it passed.
No, then I mean, sometime in the last several months.
Weeks after,
yeah.
But on the campaign trail, in large part to a statement that Bacha made, in the opening, it's because you're not going to see the fruits for a long time.
Yeah.
I can tell you about the roads, the rails, the bridges, and all these things are going to change, and the jobs it's going to create. But people are waving the sign. Where are those jobs right now?
Yeah.
And it's hard to sell something to individuals who are unemployed today about what could happen tomorrow, about how better their communities can get tomorrow. My grandmother, a lot of my family is in Jackson, Mississippi. They don't have clean running water.
Right.
So talking about an infrastructure package to these individuals who turn their water on and either it doesn't come on or it's black and muddy, they can't brush their teeth with it, can't take a bath, their kids can't go to school or anything else, that is a tough sell. And I think that as a nation, we have to recognize it's one thing to message and package. It's another thing to fully recognize that these bills take time to implement. And they also are largely dependent on state and the state recognition of what needs to be done and getting those things done. It's not just a White House initiative or a White House issue, but I do think that on the campaign trail, they could have had a much stronger conversation about this and even brought in some state leaders or at least people, affected populations particularly. And it was, I will say this as somebody who does, vote and represent Democrats in various spaces. It was quite frankly very troubling to see, just knowing how hard it was to get this done, that it kind of fell by the wayside in conversation on the campaign trail.
So, Ameshia, let me ask you this. Yeah, Ameshia, I'm curious where I think Robbie was going with this is, it's sort of hard if your number one theme on the campaign trail was vote for us because the other side are semi-fascists, vote for us because the other side is a threat to democracy, something we heard again and again from President Obama, President Biden, when democracy is on the ballot, only one party cares about that. Do you think that the reluctance to push this on the campaign trail came from the fact that you kind of don't want to cast yourself as cooperating with semi-fascists, and if that's the way that you're casting your opponents, that kind of made it difficult to talk? I think that's where Robbie was going.
That was exactly where I was going with it, Bacha. Thank you for the assist.
So what do you think about that, Ameshia?
The interesting thing I find there is in President Biden, you have someone who talks about working with segregationists. You have someone who talks about his history of working with people who are a lot crazier than anybody who participated in January 6th. So I don't think that was necessarily it, as much as it is, this is an administration and this is a Democratic Party that quite frankly falls so far behind Republicans when it comes to messaging. And it is a consistent problem that they've had. And I don't think I think this year it's kind of blown up, but it's one that we talk about every election cycle. Besides that, it's also one of not reading the room. At the end of the day, Democrats have done a very poor job of paying attention to the polls on this when it comes to what Americans actually care about, specifically around employment, specifically around inflation, and telling you this is what you should care about. Meanwhile, everything, if you just have you don't even have to do a, Ipsos poll. You can talk to people at a coffee shop and figure out what the problems in America are, and they're not going to tell you the things I think a lot of Democratic campaigns ran on, at least in the first few months. Granted, they're pivoting now, but the election day is tomorrow.
Coffee shop. That's what they're going to say. The coffee here costs too much money. Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama stumped for Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman in Philadelphia last week, which left voters in the Democratic Party nostalgic for his energy and rhetoric compared to President Biden's. Left me nostalgic. I don't vote for any of them. I was given a pretty sizable reminder in these most recent few days of how gifted Obama was at that, despite whatever you might think of his policies, gifted at the art of selling voters on his vision, rhetorically. And I hate to overemphasize it because it's stylistic. It's not, it's not about policy or anything like that. But man, you got to give it to the guy. He was good at the art of politics.
I mean, I would say that some of it was policy related. He talks about the threats to Social Security. He talks about some of the issues related to who Republicans have decided to put on the campaign trail, where you used to have candidates that at least measured up. Now it doesn't even matter. We'll take anybody. I think that he was it's stylistic, yes, because he knows what he's doing when he's out there. But he's also being very honest. And he is speaking to the people where they are. And I think that is one of the things that has always been a strong assist for President Obama, former President Obama. The only issue I have with this is that the Democratic Party utilized him too doggone late. Mm-hmm. Why in the world do you wait until you only have a handful of days before the election, now one, for Obama to be on the campaign trail, knowing that he is the strongest arsenal that you will ever have? This is the guy who can literally bring it home for you. And that part's frustrating, just acknowledging how strong he is and how capable he is to basically put on that cape within the last week of an election cycle.
What do you think, Batya?
Yeah, I think, during her, at the press conference for her confirmation, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson said something that, really brought tears to my eyes. She said, "I am the dream of the slave fulfilled." And I think for so many of us who love this nation and who struggle with our history, President Obama represented a path forward, a place that we hoped we had become. And so when I see him and he speaks, I go back to that place in my soul and my heart, and it is so moving. And then I have to remind myself, no, this is the person who engineered the foreclosure crisis for millions and millions of Americans. This is the guy who represented so much of what I think went wrong for the Democratic Party. So many working class Americans voted for him and then voted for Trump because of the policies that, he didn't start, but he entrenched. And then, of course, that view that, the other side isn't just wrong, they're dangerously wrong, they're evil, and they're stupid. I think that kind of elitism is something a lot of people associate with him. So I feel I had those exact feelings. I watch him speak and I'm like, oh my God, he's so good at that. He reminds us of the best of us, of what we can be. But then I think again of the more concrete policy, like you said, Robbie, and I feel again like it's so much of what went wrong happened, while we were longing to be our best selves. So I have all of those mixed emotions.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think he does a good job of maybe keeping disillusioned Democrats in the fold.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know. I think it's probably the hour is too late to bring back people who were his voters but have since moved right for the issues that you brought up. I don't know that they're coming back into the Democratic coalition. Everybody is kind of sorting them. A lot of working people, sorting, especially the white working class, obviously, sorting itself into the Republican Party now, a phenomenon that really, accelerated maybe toward the end of, and then of course after Obama. So it's interesting. I think it's interesting to recall an era of politics that wasn't all that long ago that is very, very, very much over, perhaps for good. So we'll have to leave it there. Our parent company, Nexstar, will, by the way, have live election coverage of the 2022 midterms. Tomorrow, News Nation will be broadcasting live starting at about 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not about, probably exactly then. What am I saying? They're partnering with Decision Desk HQ to call the big races, and they'll also have journalists from across the country, including from us here at The Hill. And of course, we will have post-election coverage for you on Rising. Please tune into that, and you can tune into more Rising right after these messages.